This video, when written, was based on Link's Awakening DX, and the artistic choices analyzed may or may not apply to the remake. Your mileage may vary. Secondly, I did not play this game as a kid. I first played it in my 20s. With that said, let us begin. Every Zelda is a coming-of-age story, though the exact nature of what it is Link is tackling is different. Both Link's Awakening and Majora's Mask take after a previous coming-of-age tale. Both deal with one thing, that which has not yet been gleaned from the hero. Link here has been traveling to further protect Hyrule, a life of service after having already done so much. And then his ship crashes. Upon seeing Marin, he immediately mistakes her for Zelda. She reminds him of her, but living in simplicity. You could say an idealized Zelda, girl next door. Director Takashi Tezuka stated that the main inspiration for the story was David Lynch's Twin Peaks. A story of a murder in a small town that seems innocent but has an unnerving atmosphere. Suspiciously weird characters, and beneath it all an extra-normal secret. The surrealism of Lynch's work is filtered through a Nintendo medieval fantasy, foremost as a strange, gigantic purple egg. The shady character types, like a man who loves to talk on a phone but cannot talk face to face, a woman who owns a chain chomp family, and the mushroom-addicted Mario. There are a number of Nintendo references first used playfully, breaking the fourth wall. This lady also comments that all of her sons look alike, referring to them having the same sprite. And they all give instructions on how to use your Game Boy but don't know what any of it means. All this serves to remind us that we are playing a game, an unreality. We are strangers in a strange land. But much like how Agent Dale Cooper comes to love Twin Peaks and wants to stay there, we and our avatar find this to all be rather pleasant as well. The village's music echoes a kind of endlessness, an endless joy, and each house carries a dreamy tune, as if Link's desire was to remain there. Much like Agent Cooper, we get to know these inhabitants. Each, even if minimal, is given their own unique lives or quirks, and the game only gets increasingly outlandish, including a village of anthropomorphic animals. The sprites here especially convey immediate personality before even talking to them. And then the minimal but well-crafted, which matters more personally, dialogue nails who they are with equal immediacy. There is a sense of more personal storytelling, with the individual hero and the shady residents, heightened by the atmosphere around them. The game also has so many secret places that they somehow one-up whatever you've seen before. Peaks loved absurdist humor, and it gets a kind of Nintendo-ification here. You truly do learn to love this place, doing things like walking a chain chomp home, or engage in the franchise's first trading quest, an idea based on Japanese folklore of a poor man with nothing but straw, eventually becoming the richest person in his town. And I still think it's the best because each person you come across is so unique. This was the first game to have this much side content, and before every dungeon there is a quest involving these people. Add to this a number of disparate, often offbeat, but taken together contradictory locations, it creates for a place that feels disjointed yet united in atmosphere. This is not just a living, breathing place, sometimes more than some 3D Zeldas manage in my opinion, but a place of unique identity. Beyond just the egg, I think the overall visual style heightens Koholint's atmosphere. Game Boy games have an abstracted, super deformed look to them, and I think, combined with these specific colors, creates something that really makes everything look very hyper-real, and complements the truth of the island. Yes, such abstractions were shared by many games of the era, but I think that's part of my point. We used to have so many weird games on portable and console, and as they became more realistic, that stopped. As for color, this game has a very specific saturation. And just to make sure I wasn't projecting, I looked up other Game Boy Color games and they don't have this specific color usage. A part of what is going on here is that we have pretty visuals and then we receive a dark surprise later, but I believe it's more than that. It's more like Lynch's Blue Velvet, which opens with rosy imagery, but the slow motion makes it look creepier than it should. You can already feel the surrealness within the cute visuals, as if the good has infected it, and as if the protagonist and us are being infected by this world. The music has an odd charm to it. Sword Search is upbeat, but something doesn't quite feel normal about it. It feels Zelda, but simultaneously un-Zelda. Even the overworld theme has an odd twist not in other versions of the song. And some tunes, as early as Mysterious Forest, feel unusual and not very Zelda at all. Even the energetic Animal Village sounds a little off. Why does this song peak so oddly? But it's only fitting that a game about a song reflects itself in its music. At the town center, Marin sings the Ballad of the Windfish. What makes the song great is not just its beauty, but its shock value. It's such a complex composition with sharp striking notes, surprising us out of a Game Boy speaker, and in a game that already has one of the portable's best soundtracks. The force is almost surreal itself, to shock us into remembering that we are playing a game. As for the song itself, it's beautiful, but it seems to contain a strange kind of sadness to it. In my opinion, it seems to exude the beauty and sadness of having to leave something behind. There is also something strange to it. Something about the Game Boy sound chip. It makes it feel so otherworldly. Upon finding the sword, we are greeted with the owl's theme, which feels as if it's clashing with all of the more jovial, oddball themes we've been experiencing in this world, interfering with a song of mystery and truth. Owls in some cases represent wisdom, but we are then left with a question. What is the wisdom of waking the windfish, as the owl wants us to do? We need to ask ourselves, what is even the main plot of this game? In many ways, there is much story, but no plot. Link's Awakening was the first game to break away from the traditional Zelda mold, with a crisis and a land to save. You begin not knowing where you are and what you're doing, you've been given the oblique task of waking the windfish, and you have no clue where your quest will lead you. Much of the story is driven by the notably surreal atmosphere, an emphasis on characters, a sense on not really knowing what is going on, not thinking much of what waking the windfish will do at first, but eventually giving way to a building set of ramifications, and a palpable feeling of an underlying set of themes. Much of the story actually ferments within your own head. We begin to converge on the island's underbelly as we approach the dungeons. Unlike the more Western fantasy-esque entrances of the older games, we're greeted here by odder, more amorphous shapes in flashier colors. Tail Cave is already more colorful than your average Zelda dungeon, but in its depths we get the brutal image of skeletons hung on chains, a morbid sight symbolizing the truth of the island. Each dungeon has its own unique appearance. Bottle Grotto with its strange yellow floor and increasing use of checkerboard, Key Cavern's dizzying green shapes pointing in various directions, Angler Tunnel's yellow stone and mix of waters, Catfish's Maw's odd-looking linework, Shrine using Key Cavern's shapes but with different colors, Eagle Tower's green diamonds, and finally, Turtle Rock's strange, hostile-feeling tilings. The dungeons are an eclectic mix of Zelda 1 and A Link to the Past, having elements of both, but forging its own identity in that. They have the Zelda 1 naming and shaping scheme of interconnected rectangles, but with a much stranger choice of themes. But the room contents and puzzles are more akin to A Link to the Past, though improved. A Link to the Past's dungeons all feel like they had one point a past splendor, but these dungeons almost feel as if they've been crafted for the hero, as if they were born to challenge him. The music here is also significant. Zelda 1's dungeon theme is ominous while exuding a theme of discovery. A Link to the Past's two themes feel violent and ominous. Link's Awakening was the first game to have every dungeon have its own theme, and here they have this ever-increasing sense of insanity. The first one is scary enough. The second dungeon, though a remix of the Dark World dungeon theme, feels as if a scary secret is hiding from you. Key Cavern reflects a similar feeling, but it's as if it's getting more intense, like it can no longer be hidden. Angler's Tunnel's music feels subversive, as if something is trying to undermine you. Catfish's Maws gets more intense, and it feels as if there is something that wishes to strike at you, with utter sheer violence, as if they're going to tear at you with their maw. Southern Shrine sounds like the corridors of a subtle nightmare, surrounded by statues as if soldiers are guarding a carefully guarded secret. And it is here where we discover the truth. The island is an illusion. It's a dream. It's not real. The Face dungeon is more mystic and mysterious, but less subversive because the truth is no longer hiding. You know, and now the game is going to fight you. The Eagle's Tower is the darkest. Some have said it sounds like an insane asylum. Turtle Rock sounds like a warped, disturbing enemy, looking to confuse and confound you for good, fitting for a final dungeon. Even some of the dungeon ideas are pretty cheeky, or feel like they're sticking their tongue out at you. This section requires 4 keyholes in a row, which is unusual, or sometimes it's just the way the game will hide enemies you need to defeat. Or really weird ideas like having to fill in every tile in the room with this thing. Both the original Zelda and A Link to the Past stuck to completely serious, classical fantasy but with a Nintendo twist for their bosses. The ones here, however, are quite strange and often require unique and at times visually surreal ways to deal with them, in ways many future Zelda games haven't quite matched. You have this blob with a rolling pin device you have to practically platform to defeat, a weird genie whose lamp you must throw to get him out. You must run through this eye using your Pegasus boots to separate it, which is surreal and visceral. Then there's this boss that hides in the walls while its tail swings around. The giant creepy face. You have a cowardly skeleton who you have to fight multiple times because he keeps running away. And he has so much personality because of that. And then you have my favorite, this guy who is a mini-boss but becomes the stage boss by jumping on the eagle. It's as if a mini rivalry is taking place within the dungeon. More Zelda games and more games in general need to do this. Your story need not stop when the dungeon begins. You can craft them to intermingle. Dungeons can have story added to them without breaking their flow. Many of the bosses can also be unusually sarcastic for a Zelda title. Some just have a noted disdain in their voice which adds to their identity and who they are. In terms of difficulty, many call these bosses easy, but I think that's only because we know the solutions now. On your first try, or if you haven't played the game in a while, it can take a lot of experimentation to figure out what it is they're weak against, which in many ways make the bosses a kind of a puzzle, making them extensions of everything else that you're doing within the gameplay. Link's Awakening is also quite different in how it plays. The Rock's Feather is very unusual. Link traditionally is not a highly maneuverable character. The Rock's Feather games feel like an exception, adding a platformer and a dodging element. It even affects swimming. It greatly changes overworld travel, how you work dungeons, and combat all at once, and it requires a level of skill, making it, in my opinion, perhaps the greatest non-sword item in Zelda history. A problem in many Zelda games is that so many items are one and done, or the dungeon formula is too transparent. You get the item and it's literally the answer to everything in the dungeon. And Link's Awakening solved this issue long before so many 3D games made it a problem. Before you get an item, it requires a lot of your items. And even after you get the dungeon item, while some obstacles of course require it, the rest of your inventory does not go to waste. There is not a single item in the game that loses its use, and that alone makes its item implementation one of the best in the entire franchise. And here I want to hone in on one of the most beautiful parts of the game: your time spent with Marin. Marin teaches you the song, which is one of the loveliest moments in the entire franchise. Paced with her going first, then you, then both of you together to create a short moment of visual poetry. Before we move on, we must now ask, why is Link holding her above his head like that? Is she a prize? I mean, why not? Link when young had no parents, witnessed his father figure die, went on an adventure that no one had the right to ask of him, traveled to a realm where he was horribly transformed, and had to walk among transformed people as trees, and then had to face the most terrible horror the world has ever known. Who has right to ask any more of him? Why shouldn't he have what he wants? He worked hard, harder than anyone else. Isn't there an army to protect Hyrule? What makes this section work, perhaps better than any moment with any romantic interest in the Zelda series, is interactivity. This game is not merely playing cutscenes for you. You get to walk with Marin, you get to take her to this cliff, you get to take her to the crane game, you get to fall down a hole with her to get her to land on you and break your neck, you get to torture chickens and bring out her sadistic side. All of this is optional, but it's you who gets to do it, and it makes it all the more sweet and special and memorable. Games are an interactive medium, and such moments should be triggered by the gameplay. And it's precisely because it's done in this way that we remember our time with Marin, and we can feel why someone would be tempted into living this simple life, to have the desire for utter simplicity. Perhaps one of the simplest but humanizing moments is when she wakes up the walrus with her song. She laughs as it falls into the sea, and she stays in the village to sing. There is something so intimate about it all. But what is Marin's purpose here? On one hand, she is a major temptation for Link to remain here, and yet, like many times before, she has helped us progress towards the truth of the island. As we travel the world, we come across things that tell us the truth. The owl statues give us Twin Peaks style lines.
I've got good news. That the mule wash is going to come back in style.
The windfish in name only, for it is neither. It is neither the wind or a fish, and in the same way nothing around us is as it seems. These lines were specifically crafted to heighten the atmosphere, and that can be said about all the dialogue in this game. It does so much with so little. It manages to take a few lines and have them convey the oddball personalities, Marin's alluring innocence, and as we have been talking about, the owl statue lines as well as the owl's dialogue after every dungeon, which all manage to heighten reality and tell us something is amiss. And even outside of the dungeons, there are moments of confronting the truth. You find an odd castle that few acknowledge. It is in the middle of nowhere and is out of place. It is a palace boiled down to essentials but invaded, very much the way a soldier hero would see it. And you must discover 5 golden objects of unique shape for the monarch. Link's own desires conflict with one another. He is a man of torn desires. A part of Link longs for what he's always done. He knows the truth of the duty he must go back to. In the Dream Shrine we sleep. A dream within a dream. The strange design of these monsters have been noted by people. And notice what they do. They reflect your actions. And you fight them above cracked floors that demand you rush them with full force. This place is a reflection of you, a symbol of defeating the self with all of your power. We literally and symbolically spiral around the room to the center, and it is here we find the ocarina, which is a hugely important item, and will become an important key in winning the day. This again is found in the dream within a dream. Link on a subconscious level knows the truth. We also meet this ghost in an interesting episode. He yearns for his memories of home, but in a simple boo-hoo manages to move on. It is a letting go of nostalgia, as nostalgia is often an illusion. Doubly so when you realize the ghost has nostalgia for something that has never existed. Before we begin to bring everything together, I have to say that there is so much more I could have mentioned. Just how the Nintendo references start out cute, then they become enemies, then they become increasingly vicious, and finally end up these hard-to-beat anti-Kirbys, or how you can try to wake up the windfish with less instruments and it not work, which I think respects your efforts. I could mention how everything in the game has such fluid animations for a Game Boy title. I could also get into how the world, though small, focuses on a screen at a time, which helps make the world feel larger than it really is, as each screen feels like a mystery of its own. Though Link to the Past really amped up using dungeon items to expand overworld travel, Link's Awakening made it feel more sophisticated in how it executed it. And I also like how bosses have multiple ways to defeat them sometimes, some of which have been discovered with time and have become standard. And I also want to mention how this game gave birth to bomb arrows. But alas, it is time to end this. Much of the late game takes place in the mountains, where the song Tall Tall Heights feels the most Zelda of all the tracks. We fall under final temptations. We have one final romantically inclined moment with Marin. Even the owl is unsure what will happen. The nightmare attempts to make Link believe he is part of the dream. And we must tear down such thoughts, quite literally. And you must not let it blow you back down. Turtle Rock, named after a place you were in once before, is an acknowledgement of the acceptance of the truth. You awaken a link to the past, to the real world. And it takes the form of a maze of confusion that forces you to search and understand every part of it. The egg appears beautiful on the outside, but on the inside is actually a maze of terror, and at its core is a shadowy nightmare. Notice how the nightmare emanates from below Link's feet. He must face that which is symbolically in him. Link fights everything. He fights beasts he has slain before. He fights enemies of his past. He faces the shadow of his most fearsome foe. And he fights the very nightmare that rules. A final challenge should test everything we've learned, and it takes almost our entire inventory and figuring out when and how to use each item to win. But after a long battle, he slays his enemy. Link's Awakening's story style is similar to the tradition of the dream vision, used often in medieval literature. He falls asleep during a life crisis, encounters a world that seems beautiful but may be a prison. He goes through a set of allegorical trials which help shape him as a hero, and the themes pertain just as much to us as it does the protagonist. The owl stops calling Link young lad. He acknowledges him as the hero for his resolve, for courage, wisdom, and power. Once the instruments are played one by one, you'll see that all you had become attached to vanish. Only a memory now. To me, Link desires to love the Princess Zelda in a ways he knows he never can. Many other Links were more fortunate, but not this one. He cannot have a homely, peaceful life apart from Hyrule with her. He also cannot retire from his heroic duties. At least not right now. He must train. He must be the hero that Hyrule needs. These desires are the last thing he must be purged of. The last thing his coming of age demands of him. He has faced his inner self, his internal trial, and killed a part of himself that needed to die by his own hands. But as sad as it is, much like the Ballad of the Windfish, such overcoming is simultaneously beautiful. The hero is victorious and is all the more better for it. This game and the Oracle titles always made me feel like that he had more adventures after this. Maybe one last grand one. But unfortunately, that game has never been made. Hopefully, after such selfless service, this Link will be allowed to settle down and live happily. The question one considers in the game is whether or not it is right to wipe out this island. While the answer is up to each and every person who plays this game, I want to bring up the symbolic value of this narrative concept. It comes in the form of our personal illusions, our own false dreams or false desires. Such things feel real, but they are not. And to fight them feels like fighting something real. The nightmare attempts to make Link believe he is part of the dream, that he will disappear too. There are many things we falsely believe are necessary to our identity, and we think if we lose them, we lose ourselves. That our identity will disappear. Our sympathy for the nightmare is almost like a lamentation for ourself. That part of our lives crying out to not be defeated. That it deserves to live, but it is necessary for it to die. Though the dream is the Windfish's, the nightmare throughout the game has been reacting towards Link, and that is most apparent during the final boss. There is a fear about uncovering the truth about ourselves, the terror of having to strip away ourselves layer by layer, and yet sometimes we must take our lives apart piece by piece. To not do so would allow what the nightmare said he wanted, that nothing would change. But that also means everything would change for the worse. All for a fake peace in a dream and Link's body rotting in the real world. The final nightmare, emanating from beneath Link, represents all the fear, trauma, and emotions driving him to want to give up and have a peaceful life. They represent his burdens. But as the nightmare would engulf the island if he did that, so too would it allow Ganon to return and take the real world. It is a test of our resolve. But you end the nightmare. You have overcome the inner burden. Link's Awakening speaks to a hard truth. Some dreams must end. It's time to wake up. Not all dreams we have will survive. Some dreams must die. And many must be killed by our own hands. Or perhaps certain desires need to be killed. Or perhaps there is a certain time in our lives that we need to move past. Or there is something we're keeping alive in our lives that is preventing us from moving forward. Perhaps there are lingering fears that haunt us. But often, duty and obligation are more important. The dreams of childhood must give way to sacred duty. Being a hero is not merely about winning the outer battle, but the inner battle first. And there is a great beauty in that. We must now mention Marin, who in the true ending becomes a seagull. And here is an often missed point. Marin on some level knew that she was in a dream. She supplies you with the song to wake the windfish and tells you to play it. She keeps singing it for some reason and the owls wonder if she's trying to wake the fish. She has helped us progress, as with the walrus. In fact, she is often associated with waking up. She wakes up Link, she wakes up the walrus, and she sang by the rooster which needed to be awoken from the dead. And she constantly thinks of leaving the island when no one else thinks there is anything there, and in some cases cannot even comprehend it. Perhaps that is why ultimately she is able to leave the island. Marin's dream, interestingly, was reality itself, allowing her to be the dream that comes to life. The windfish says, "Somehow, thou may recall this island. That memory must be the real dream world." Such lines can mean many things. On a timeline level, we could apply them to the Oracle games, which uses many sprites from this title. This could also be Link, who takes with him the memory and his victory. Perhaps it is Marin flying away as a symbol of the dream's everlasting effect on Link, and the change in him. Maybe it is more literal. Maybe after his long service is done, he'll be able to meet Marin again and live happily. One, some, or all of the above may be true. But there is one last interpretation, the meta one. I have referred many times to the game's fourth wall breaking references. For us, a video game is a kind of dream world, and Link is our avatar. We are partakers in the dream and we take something with us. The battles we went through, what we overcame, what we felt, and what we take with us, that's the dream in the real world.
The memories you have and the role you were assigned are burdens you had to carry. It doesn't matter if they were real or not. That's never the point. I know you didn't have much in terms of choices this time. But everything you felt, thought about during this mission is yours. And what you decide to do with them is your choice.
No, never heard the name before. I'll pick my own name and my own life. I'll find something worth passing on.
Link's Awakening is the dream mirror upon which we can reflect ourselves. And as Marin says of the ballad, it will always remain in your heart. I hope that you enjoyed this video. It was a huge labor of love. I ask that you like and comment for the algorithm lords. Subscribe, as if you liked this video I will be getting back into doing this for classic RPGs. Also, I have a Twitter now for the first time, so do the thing that you do for the Twitter. Anyway, thank you for watching, and God bless you all.